So if everyone would like to go along with me, you can log into your redesign test instance and go ahead and log in. And this is what the home page looks like when you initially log in. So inventory is Redesign Software's answer to Classics EIS. Inventory went into production a year ago, fall of 2021. We are all learning this system. They just did a new update over the weekend, so they're constantly updating and refreshing things as we finding bugs and different things within the software. Inventory is set up a lot like USAS and USPS, meaning it is web-based, and inventory does communicate with USAS. So inventory is broken up into 5 different categories. There is the home, core, transactions, reports, system, and then we have a help and the logout button. Also from this home screen, you can see what application you're in. So there's the inventory, the district, the user, and it does tell you what is the current period. So for this demo account that I'm in FY 2021. For you guys should be in at least FY 22. I also want to talk about this help real quick. So if you go to the help, and if we first go to the about, this gives you more information about the application itself. It lets you know what version it is. So we are in version 1.24 now, and this was updated on the 16th. So this was a pretty recent update. It gives you browser requirements for all the different browsers, and it gives you a little bit more acknowledgments and credits. Also, if you go to the help, is the documentation, and it'll take you to the user guide just like USAS and USPS. And so you can get to the documentation straight from the software, just like the other 2 packages. Okay. So first we'll start with core. So core contains the central pieces of inventory, and it contains the following. It contains asset classes, category codes, condition codes, configuration, disposition codes, fiscal years, functions, funds, local codes, and organizational codes. And we're going to go through each one. So the first one is asset classes. Asset classes are used to define the local asset class codes. The asset class codes are 4-digit codes which are used to define broad classes of fixed assets. The gap schedules require that each item be assigned an asset class. The first 2 digits of the asset classes are defined by the state of Ohio. If the asset classes do not have any transactions tied to it, it will not import into inventory from EIS. This asset class can be recreated. So the following are the classes as defined by the state. So O1 is land, O2 is building and building improvements, O3 is furniture, fixtures, and equipment, O4 is vehicles, O5 is infrastructure, O6 is books, and O7 is construction in progress. Then the second 2 digits are optional and may be used to further break down the asset classes if desired. So here in the software, this is what our asset class grid looks like. And we have the create button, which you can click on it and you can create a new asset class if need be. We have the export grid, which your options to export is from CSV or Excel. We are recommending that you use Excel because there was a bug with using the CSV version. And you can export. And then I'm going to drag this over. This is what your Excel spreadsheet looks like from the grid. So straight from the grid, you can export. We have our codes and we can move things around within our grid. So we can move things interchangeably. We have an eyeball, we have an edit, and we have a delete. So the eyeball is to view, but you can go in and view the item. The edit, where you can go in and change. And then the delete. And that is the asset classes. So next is category codes. So category codes are used to define the item's categories. They are used to further subdivide asset classes into finer units. Although these codes are not required for GAAP reporting, they are extremely useful in generating reports and for updating cost or insurable values. So here's our grid. Once again, we have the create. We can export. We can move our columns around. We have our view, we have our edit, and we have our delete. And that is category codes. Next is condition codes. So condition codes are used to define the item's current condition. We have the create button. We can export grid items. You can move your columns around, and we have the view, the edit, and the delete. Next is configuration. Now your configuration screen will look a little different than mine's because I do have admin access. A lot of you would either have standard view or group manager, so screens will look different than what I have. But this is the item inventory configuration. The inventory configuration is used to set up the configuration for the inventory system. The settings in this option directly control some of the operations of the inventory system. Inventory does not need to be closed for the current year or the fiscal year when USAS fiscal year is closed, and the closing of the USAS for fiscal year has no effect on the inventory closing. So I'm going to click edit so you can see things a little better. But you have your IRN, and all this information came straight over from Classic, the EIS MNT, the DAT screen. So there's your district name. It's going to tell you when was the last year your fiscal year was closed. This email year reporting bundle email is new. Once when you are in production, and we'll go over this when you go live, we'll need to put in email addresses to have the report bundles emailed to. Right now, they don't there's not a file archive for them to go out to, and that they would have to be emailed from the system to someone at the district, and then they would need to be stored on a computer until that feature is available. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail a little later. There's your foundation percentage if you have that. Tag number auto-populated enabled. The GAT flag if you're using USAS function codes, and if you're using receive dates. So this is the information that's in the configuration. This disabled GAT flag is an admin feature that you guys won't have access to. Next is disposition codes. So disposition codes are used to define the disposition method of an item whose status is disposed of. The disposition codes are utilized when posting an item under transactions items. So here's our grid. We can create more disposition codes. We can export the grid items. We can move our columns around. We can view, we can edit, and we can delete. So next is fiscal years, and fiscal years is pretty much like the posting period in USAS and USPS. So a fiscal year displayed on the grid is the entire fiscal year or period for which a transaction can be posted. You may have more than one fiscal year open simultaneously, but only one fiscal year can be current. The open fiscal year allows you to post transactions that contain dates within that year, and the current fiscal year can be open or closed fiscal years. You do not need to reopen the fiscal year to make it current. So here we just have 2020. I'm going to click create, and we're going to go ahead and create 2021. And if I hit close, now I have 2 years open, and you can see that 2020 is open and it's true. 2021 is not open and it's not current. But if I wanted to make it current, all I would need to do is click this circle check mark and ask me, do I want to make it current? And now it's current. And then I can also click yes to open it. So now I have 2020 open, 2021 is open, and 2021 is current. So it's just like you're posting periods over in USAS and USPS. So we can create, we can export grid items, we can view, we can edit. You notice the delete is shaded, so we can't delete. This is to open, this is to close, and that's to make current. Any questions about fiscal years? If migrating from Classic, Classic's current fiscal year and capitalization criteria will be imported and will appear on the grid. Example, if the last year closed in EIS was 2020, this means current is FY 2021 upon import to Redesign. The current and open year displayed on the grid would be 2021. It will also import the dollar and life limits from Classic's EIS MNT DAT screen and display them on the grid. So we have the year, there's the start date, the end date, our dollar limit, our life limit, and then of course open and true, open and current. Any questions about fiscal years? Okay. Moving to functions. Functions are used to define the item's current function or activity for which an item is currently being used. The code can be up to 4 characters, numeric or alphanumeric. The function code is not necessarily the source from which the item was purchased. So an example is an asset might be purchased from the general fund, but used in the cafeteria. In this case, the function would reflect the cafeteria use where it's currently being used. So we can create more functions. We can export these to a grid. We can move our columns around. We can view, we can edit, and we can delete. Next is funds. Funds are used to define the item's current fund for which an item is currently being used. The code can be up to 4 characters, numeric or alphanumeric. The fund code is not necessarily the source from which the item was purchased. To figure out what fund should be used, you should look at the location of the item for a clue as to its use. There are 3 types of funds employed in governmental accounting. So the first one is governmental, those funds which most governmental functions typically are financed, proprietary or commercial type funds, which are used for business type activities that are similar to those found in the private sector, or fiduciary, those funds that are held in trustee capacity for other governmental units or funds. So we can create, we can export this grid, we can move these items around, we can view, we can edit, and we can delete. Next is location codes. Location codes are used to define the location of an item. The location codes consist of two parts, category and number. The category and number each consist of 8 characters that can either be alphabetic or numeric. Generally, the category code identifies the building or center where the item is located, which the number code identifies a specific location or room within the building. Setting up the codes in this manner makes it possible to generate reports listing all the items located in individual rooms. The location codes are not required for GAAP reporting, however, they must be defined in order to add an item to the inventory file. So once again, we can create codes, we can export them, we can view, we can edit, we can delete, and we can move things around. And the last thing in this section is organization codes. Organization codes are used to identify which department, building, person, or office is responsible for an item. The code can be up to 4 characters, numeric or alphanumeric. The codes are for the district's use and not required for GAAP. Usually, they are used to identify different buildings in the district and are useful in generating an insurance values report and other reports that are broken out by building. So we can create and export, view, edit, delete, and we can move our columns around. Are there any questions concerning anything under the core? Okay, there's no questions. Next, we'll move to transactions. The transaction menu contains main transaction processing for maintaining the inventory system. Transaction menu consists of the entity's daily functions for processing inventory. It consists of acquisitions, dispositions, items, pending items, and transfers. So we'll go through each one. So the first one is acquisitions. The information entered and stored on the acquisition records is primarily the purchase order information about the item. Acquisition transactions are created automatically when adding a new item via transaction items. They may also be created in transaction acquisitions for items already recorded on inventory in order to update the item as bulleted below. So posting an acquisition transaction for a new item is optional if the GAAP flag is unchecked. It is recommended to always post an acquisition for each item added to the inventory. If the GAAP flag is checked, an acquisition transaction must be posted. This is necessary in tracking the acquisition dollar amounts reported on the schedule of changed and fixed asset report. Brief description on posting acquisition transactions for various other reasons. You're adding improvements to an item, you're recording historical acquisition information, you're recording a lease payment or other periodic payment, you're correcting an error from a previous fiscal year, and you're tracking grant items. So here's our acquisition grid. We have our create. And remember, you're only using this create is if you're already adding something to an existing tag number. We can export the items from this grid. We can view, we can edit, and the delete, you can only delete an item that was created within that current period. So we also have here this more button. So the more button is where you can add more information onto your grid. So if you want to add some of these, and you see there's more information that gets added to the grid. And if you want to filter, it is recommended that you use a % sign, and then you can start entering information in and it will enter and filter in accordingly. So the percent sign is the important thing when you're filtering. So let's go in and let's try to create. So this pending items is where you would go in, and if you wanted to add an acquisition to an existing tag number, and then it would auto populate all the purchase order information in there. Just remember, this can't be a new tag. If you're doing a new tag, you have to do the acquisition another way. But if you're adding to an existing tag number, this is where you would put in your existing tag number here and then click create. See, there's a question. Can you add directly into the grid? Yes, you can, Carla. For acquisitions, remember, you can only add an acquisition to an existing tag. We'll go over how to add a new grid item, a new item here in a few minutes. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And remember, you can move your items around. You can make your grid more specialized or more specific to how you want it, more customized. But that is acquisitions. Okay. Next, we'll move to dispositions. So dispositions are used to dispose of an item from the inventory system. Disposition transactions contain information about disposing of an item. These transactions provide a way of recording what has happened to assets no longer being used by the district. Disposition transactions are not required if not on GAAP reporting, but are recommended. Posting a disposition transaction keeps the item's record on file, changing the status to D, disposed of, on the item record. If on GAAP reporting and a capitalized asset is disposed of, the change status will be reflected in the dispositions column of the change schedules. So we can create, we can export, we can view, we can edit, and remember the delete only shows up if the date's in the current period. You can move things around. You have your more button. This is what the create looks like. So you can select an item from the drop-down list. And I do believe it does do a lazy load. So if you know, you can do a lazy load instead of going through and looking through each one. Any questions about dispositions? Okay, next is the big one. It's items. So items are used to access the records of items in the inventory system. It is also used to add new items, modify existing items, and delete item records. The functionality of this module depends on the setting, the GAAP setting. If the flag is unchecked, items allow you to manually change the fund, function, asset class, or original cost of any item. You are also able to add items without being prompted for an acquisition transaction. If the flag is checked, you are limited to the manual modifications that can be made to item records. Specifically, the fund, function, class, and original cost are not modifiable. Changes to these fields must be done by posting transactions via other modules under transactions. It also becomes necessary to post an acquisition transaction when adding a new item to inventory. So here on our screen, we have the create, we have the export items, we have this depreciate button, which I'll get into in a little bit. It's real faint, but there is a checkbox next to it. There is the eyeball, there is the edit, there is the delete. And you see this delete is because it's probably not, yeah, it's not capitalized. So you can delete some capitalized non-capitalized options. We have our more button. So we can add more items to our grid and we can change things around. So this depreciate. So depreciate items. The depreciate button on the grid program recalculates the LTD depreciation field from scratch. It does not calculate depreciation for the current year. Another year's worth of depreciation will be automatically calculated and the LTD depreciation updated when an open period is closed. Making changes to the depreciation for existing items usually occur when a district is cleaning up their data in preparation for GAAP reporting. Once a district is actively tracking depreciation, this program should be used only with extreme caution. Items with a status of inactive, OTAG, or disposed will be ignored when using depreciate. Run projection or actually update the LTD depreciation for selected items on your grid. Check the box to select the items you want to depreciate and click the depreciation button. So you would click what items you would want to depreciate, and then you would click the depreciation button. And it defaults at projection mode only. And then if you were to uncheck depreciation only, it would actually post. But use this with caution, and if you need to call us so that we can walk you through this depreciation button, we would be more than happy to do so. I'm also going to click on one of these and show you something new that they just put into, they being SSDT, into the software. So now there is a item depreciation adjustment. In order to edit an item's existing LTD depreciation to a specific value, you may create a depreciation transaction. Depreciation adjustments can only be created for active items that have not been fully depreciated. You can only create, modify, or delete an adjustment for the current fiscal year. So because this item I must not have picked an active one. It's fully depreciated. Let me find a better one. Let's see if this one's a good one. Yes. Okay. So this one is active and capitalized. So you can see the create button is now there, and you can create an adjustment if you want to increase this. So say we want to increase this by $200. You see right now the LTD depreciation is at 15,570.28. I save it, it just went up by $200. I could edit it or I can delete it. Remembering that this is something, as long as you're within the date within the current period. So like I said, this is brand new. They added this a couple of weeks ago. Yep, it's close. So let's do an activity of creating an item. So when I click create, what first pulls up is the acquisition. So we'll just pull something from the pending items. And I'm going to give it a tag number. So I'm going to say it's test. And I'm okay with everything that it recorded. And I have to click continue to item. So then it takes you over, it moves over from the acquisition record to the actual item record. And then you can put in all the other information that you want it to. We can add a category code from here. We can say what fund, what function. We can say the asset class. There is the replacement cost and insurance valuable cost, which is the same as the original cost. I can put lease information in there. And this is user-defined information. I would use this user-defined information if you wanted to do some, tag it in a different way or put some other information in there. I was talking with the district and they were coming up with different ways with how they would use user-defined information so that internally they would know what to do. This is a good area to use that. Okay, when I think everything is good, I can save the item. So then once the item is saved, it changes. So I can edit, I can close, I can add an additional acquisition to this. And if there was more than one item, I can also split it up. Any questions about adding a new item? Okay. We'll click close. One thing you do have to do, there isn't an X like it is in USAS and USPS. You do have to click the cancel or close button to get out of the pop-up windows. Next is pending items. So the main purpose of pending items is to allow you to view the items that are currently on the pending file. The program can also be used to delete items from the pending file. Note, you cannot add or edit a pending item. Pending items are in a sense a holding file in which items that are required by the district are kept until being entered as an item in inventory. Items are placed on the pending file when using the pull from USAS option on the pending items grid. Once items are on the pending file, transaction items can be used to pull the pending file data into the new item, or acquisition can be used to pull the pending data. To generate a report of your current pending items, run the pending items list under the report menu. So here's our pending items, and you see you can delete. There is the box next to it where you can check them all or check individually, and then you could use this delete button. You can export this stuff. This is the pull from USAS button, and they just added this text connection, but you would put in a date that you wanted it to pull from. I think we have a question. Yeah, I was going to get to that. Okay, so I'm sure we have some districts that do use SCView. If you use SCView, you'll need to make sure you work with them to making sure that the EIS checkbox is enabled when you're invoicing so that the items from the purchase order can populate on this pending items list. It's the same way if you're invoicing through USAS as well. You'll need to make sure that you're check marking that EIS when you're invoicing so that the items will start populating on your pending items file. Okay. Are there any questions about the pending items? Okay. Then the last section is the transfers. So transfers is a program used to post transfer transactions from inventoried items. Transfer transactions are posted to record a change in the item's asset class, fund, or function codes. These transactions are not necessary if the gap flag is unchecked. These codes can simply be modified on the item record. Once the gap flag is checked, these fields become non-modifiable or unmodifiable in an item, and any changes require a transfer transaction to be posted. For capitalized asset, these changes are then reflected in the transfers in and transfers out columns of the gap change schedules. So if you click create, you can pull in a pending, an item, and it will populate for you. And if it's fund, it gives you what the owed fund value is. If you want to do function, it would give you the owed fund, the owed value. Asset class is the same way. And then you can say, there's another drop-down list that you can use what the new one would want to be. And then you can check mark it and say if it's an error adjustment. Any questions about transfers? Any questions about the transaction items? Acquisition, dispositions, items, pending items, or transfers? Okay. Next, we'll move to reports. So the reports module allows a user to generate canned reports. Right now, all these reports are canned reports. They do not have the capability of doing Excel reports yet or CSV reports. So that is kind of the only limitation that there is right now. So all reports are canned reports and are located under the reports menu. They are generated in PDF format only. The reports contain separate pages for each fund type, governmental, proprietary, or fiduciary, and the gap reports exclude items that do not meet capitalization criteria, items which have a status of disposed of, inactive, or old tag, and items coded as operating leases. So there are two types of reports. We have the gap reports and the non-gap reports. And first we'll go over the gap reports. So there are 4 gap reports: the fixed assets by function, fixed asset by source, change schedule and depreciation report, and change of schedule and fixed asset report. So the first one we'll go over is the fixed asset by source report. So the fixed asset by source report is the classic counterparts EIS 101. The report provides a summary of original cost of fixed assets by their source. The report may be generated in preparation for closing for the fiscal year. So you can just simply generate it. You know it's working by its movement up in the upper left-hand screen. We can also duplicate a tab like you could do in USAS or USPS. So while this one is working, I'm going to get another one working. So the fixed assets by function and class report. It is class's counterpart EIS 102. The report provides a schedule of fixed assets by function and class. The schedule can be generated by function and class or summary by function and class. If the gap flag is checked in core configuration, this report may be generated in preparation for closing for the fiscal year. Fixed asset by by function or class determines the appropriate line or column on the report by looking at the function or activity code and the asset class code in transaction items. Separate pages for each fund type. The fund type is determined by looking at the fund type associated with the fund in the item. Items with a blank function or activity or asset class code will be listed as unclassified. Invalid functions or invalid class messages mean that the associated code is not located in core function or core asset classes. If there are amounts associated with the function and or asset class, add the representative code in core. So let's get this one going. Okay, so this is an example of what the fixed asset schedule by function and class looks like. I'm going to increase it in size. So there's the governmental, and it has the function and the original cost and book value. And there's another fund. There's the fiduciary. And it'll give you a grand total at the end. And these are the same reports that you're going to be running on balancing day, which we will talk about in a little bit. Okay. The next report is the depreciation, is the schedule change and fixed asset report. Its classic counterpart is the EIS 103. The change schedule contains information by fund, function, or asset class on the beginning and ending balances for the fiscal year. The report displayed additions, dispositions, transfers, and adjustments that occur causing changes in the balances of the fixed assets. This information is needed in preparing the GAAP report. This program is run at the end of the fiscal year before closing or is desired during the fiscal year. The GAAP flag must be set in order for the report to produce any meaningful information. So I'm going to run it by asset class. And we're just going to say show a summary. Okay. And then this is what that changed in fixed assets is done by fund. And it tells you all this information. Increase it just a little bit. That fixed asset by source report finally produced. And then this is an example of what that report looks like. So it breaks it up by fund. And then it gives you a total. And like I said, these are the same exact reports that you're going to be running on balancing day. And there's your change report. And then the last report is the change of schedule and depreciation report. Its classic counterpart is the EIS 104. The change in depreciation contains information by fund, function, or asset class on the depreciation of fixed assets. The report displays additions, dispositions, transfers, and adjustments that occur causing changes in depreciation balance of the fixed assets. This information is needed for preparing the GAAP report. The program is run at the end of the fiscal year or as desired by the district, and the GAAP flag must be set in order to produce any meaningful results. So we'll do it by asset class, and we'll do a summary and generate report. Not sure how long that report's going to take, but now we'll go ahead and start talking about the non-GAAP reports. So here are the list of non-GAAP reports. It's the audit report, the asset listing by grant or source, book value report, brief asset listing report, code listing report, fiscal year-end balances report, fiscal assets listing report, location worksheet, pending items list report, and depreciation posting report. Oh, that one failed. This is our demo account, so I'm not quite certain why it failed. Okay, so first we'll go over is the audit report. So the audit report is Classics EIS 801. It tracks the changes that have been made in inventory application. The official report should be reviewed and signed by the treasurer. It must be kept for examination purposes. Okay, so something going on with that depreciation report. So here's the audit report. You can do it by specific tag numbers. You can put a start and stop date. You can do report types. You can select users. And you have different sort options. So let's see. Let's see what gets produced. There's no data. Like I said, this is a demo, and I'm not quite certain what's all in the demo. We just refreshed it this morning, so. All right, asset listing by grant or source report. So its classic counterpart is the EIS 203. It's a listing of acquisition transactions by source, account code, and or grant identifier. Contains much of the information found on the acquisition record plus the location of the item. Can be ran any time to obtain acquisition transaction information. To produce a listing of all items produced under a particular grant or set of grants. And an item must have one or more acquisition transaction record to be included in this report. So this is a report. This is another report that we're going to have you run on balancing day. So let's go ahead and just generate the report as is. And then this is what the asset listing by source report looks like. It gives you your tag information and description, the account number, the location. If you had any grant information, it would show that. PO and check number would show that, the date, the original cost, and the amount. The next report is the book value report. Its classic counterpart is the EIS 305. It lists the original cost, salvage value, book value, percentage of depreciation, and the last year of useful life on selected items. May be run once a year to determine the book value of assets stored on the inventory system. Will only include those items which depreciation information was entered on transaction items. Must include all capitalized items for GAAP reporting and may include other items for which depreciation is being tracked. So if you wanted to select multiple things, you would just select that. We're not going to say a specific. We're just going to let it run. And this is what the book value report looks like. And if I scroll down to the bottom, it will give you your totals. Total by funds and then grand totals. The next report is the code listing report. Its classic counterpart was the EIS 001. It lists all the data maintained on the state and local codes, as well as the configuration. All data maintained for a particular code type is included on this report. You may select what portions of the report you want to generate after the local codes have been entered. Under the core menu options, this report may be run to produce a hard copy of all codes for reference, as well as to include in the board policy manual. So we're just going to say all codes. And then this is something that you can have at your desk to use as reference as you're entering in new information. So each page has a different code on it. Okay. Brief asset listing report. Its classic counterpart is the EIS 304. It generates a brief listing, one line item per item of all assets on the inventory file or a subset of these. Report may be used to generate an additions report listing assets added since a specific date by selecting an acquisition date. It will give you the essential information about assets in a condensed form, used as a balancing report for gap schedules when run for capitalized items only. Listing includes the item's asset class, fund, and function codes, useful to help find an inventory file which are missing one or more of these values which are required for gap reporting. So we'll go down and we'll just generate the report. And it's just a quick and dirty report. One line. Okay. Next is leased asset listing report. Its classic counterpart is the EIS 202. If a district maintains information on leased assets, either capital or operating, then the report will generate a listing of all leased items which the acquisition method leased or with a leased vendor number, normally generated at the end of each fiscal year, but can be ran at any time. Gap schedules will record the total original cost, present value of any capital leases which meet the capitalization limit. So this is what the lease asset listing report looks like. Next is location worksheet. Its classic counterpart is the EIS 302. Reports a listing of inventory items by their location, category, and number. This is a one line per inventory item worksheet, which is designed to aid you in completing and updating an inventory. It's also useful to check on what items at a given location are actually stored on the system and to see if any have been removed from the location. Could be used prior or after to check the accuracy of an appraisal company. And this is what that worksheet looks like. Okay. Next is the pending items list. Its classic counterpart is the EIS 501, and it's a listing of all items currently on the pending file. Contains all PO information available from USAS that applies to inventory, a blank space for tag number, as well as the option to include blank lines for recording other information such as serial numbers and model numbers. So this is what the pending information report looks like. Then the depreciation. Let's see here. Oh, it's giving me a warning. Too many open fiscal years, so I'm gonna go close the fiscal year. So the depreciation posting report, its classic counterpart is the EIS DEP. The report replicates the classic EIS DEP report and includes both capitalized and non-capitalized items and is sorted by fund. So because I'm closing the fiscal year, it's going to take a moment. So then the last report to discuss is the fiscal year report bundle. So its classic counterpart is the EIS-CD. Bundles implements Classic's EIS-CD and will generate a 26-page report or 26 different reports specified below when an open period is closed. The report will be zipped and emailed to the email address or addresses specified in Core Foundation. In order for the report to be emailed, the email in Core configuration must be populated with a valid email address. Multiple email addresses can be entered separated by commas. Once the report bundles are generated and emailed, you can review the status of the report bundles progress by looking at the job section in system configurations. It is recommended districts store the reports in the zip file until the documents management and archival project is available. At this time, districts will be available. At that time, districts will be able to upload previous generated documents. So I did go through and have those reports emailed to me previously. So you'll get an email, something like this. There'll be a sender, more than likely the treasurer's name, or whatever email address you would like to use, and then the two. So what I did is I went into the core configuration and I put my email address for it to be sent to me. And then also in the configuration, another configuration area, I had my email address also sent out. So here are the zip reports. And if you double click on them, here are the 26 reports, canned reports that get emailed when you close the fiscal year. And just ask the question, can you generate a new items list or disposition list for the fiscal year? Yes, I do believe that you can. It would be possibly the brief items, the brief asset listing report, I think allows you to look at different things. I think I've kind of locked up the system. But yes, I think you can. And when we get off the call, we can go into those. So where I got the EIS-CD for the bundles is I emailed it. I had it emailed to myself. And that triggers that is when you're in core and fiscal years and you actually close the fiscal year. When you close the fiscal year, that generates an event for these reports to be emailed to you. And then when you get that zip file, you are to keep that onto your local machine until the file archive is available to be uploaded for that fiscal year. We don't have an ETA yet as to when that is going to be available, but we will definitely keep everyone posted. Are there any questions about the reports? So then just to go over the list of reports, there is the SSDT asset listing by source report, SSDT book value by asset class report, SSDT book value by function report. There's the SSDT brief asset listing by acquisition, SSDT brief listing asset by class. There's a brief asset listing by disposition. There's a brief asset listing by function, brief asset listing by fund, closing balance report, a detailed schedule and depreciation, and they do it a report by class, function, and fund. And then they do a detailed change in fixed assets by class, by function, by fund. Fixed asset by source report, inventory audit report, schedule a change by type, by class, and then by function and class, and then your summary report. So summary of change in depreciation by class, function, and fund, and also a change in asset classes. And this is brand new. Okay. Let's see if it'll let me talk about this next section. So are there any other reports on, any other questions on reports? Before I try to move the system. So under system, the system menu, and this also depends on what your access level is. So the system menu contains programs that control how processing is defined and done on the system and other options that only an administrator would access. So the first one is capitalization criteria. It's not gonna let me go to it. So the capitalization criteria is used to change the dollar amount and or life limit for districts that have their GAAP flag checked. Changes made will be retroactive to the beginning of the fiscal year. A detailed report sorted by tag number will be generated, including the fund, function, and asset class, capitalization status, and or new and beginning balance amounts for each item that was changed. A summary recap subtotal by asset class, function, and fund total groups is included at the end of the report. Let me see. If I can't get into something else for you real quick. I'm going to show you Oakwood City. I'm just going to go into their capitalization criteria just so that you can see it. Here you can see the fiscal year, the capitalization amount, and the life limit. And if you ever wanted to change it or see what or run this report, you'd click submit, and then it would run a report. And then if you ever wanted to, I had to do that this morning with one of our districts. An amount did not capitalize over, and SSDT suggested that I run this report to see what was on there, and then I could do it in actual for that amount to actually be capitalized. So that's capitalization criteria. Next is change password. So you can go in here and change your password. It's pretty self-explanatory. Configurations in 2 spaces. So there's the configuration, and you guys would not see this information. This is an ITC access that we would have. So if you ever wanted to use Active Directory, we can install that. We can do a different password configuration. This email configuration is what we would use for the report bundles. Jobs, we can go in and look at the job scheduler if you needed to, and then there's a migration import. The next thing is the import, which I think is something that you guys will really like and enjoy. So we can import a lot of different items into this new redesign system. So we can do an item import, acquisition import, disposition import, asset class code import, category code import, condition code import, disposition code import, location code import, and organization code import. So the screen changes depending on which one you're trying to do. Of course, it would need to be an CSV file that we would upload. And I'm going to show you in the documentation what the import criteria is. So if you go to System, Import, and then for an item, as an example, this is what the information would need to look like. And these are all the fields that you guys can import into the system. And it does let you know what is a required field. So within the documentation, it tells you what is all needed to do a import or a mass load into Redesign. And if you want help and assistance with that, we'd be more than happy to give you the template. But you can do import and you can update existing information. So I think everyone should be excited about that. And last is users. Not everyone probably has access to users, but this is where we go in and add your user information. There are several roles out there. So obviously ITC staff has admin privileges, which can see everything. Then there's group manager, which grants and writes access to the inventory system and includes all standard pages and access to the configuration and capitalization criteria. Then there is the standard role, which grants, reads, and writes access to the inventory system, includes all standard pages and the ability to pull items from USAS on the pending transaction page. And then there's the read-only access, which you can only read only. Okay. Oh, we're done. Yes, so now it's finally done. So if I go to core fiscal years, 2021 is no longer open. It is now closed. 2020 is closed. 2021 is open. So now I could run this depreciation posting report and I can generate it. And then would be the depreciation posting report for 2021. So that was everything under systems. Are there any questions regarding systems? No questions. Okay. We'll go back to documentation, and I want to talk about the appendix. So within the appendix, there's several useful information in there. So first is the checklist. This is the SSDT's suggested or recommended inventory fiscal year end checklist. I do know that we are meeting as a group and working on this one as well. So we're asking that no one to actually, once when you guys are migrated over and not close FY22 yet until you let us know. There is a section for general procedures. So as several of you guys said that you guys are, this is kind of train the trainer and you guys are going to train some other people. You can give them these sheets on, this is how to do an items processing. So how to create a new using the pending file, how to create new with no pending file, how to add multiple acquisitions during the item creation, edit existing item, delete an existing item, depreciating an existing item, and splitting an existing item. They have similar things for acquisitions, dispositions, and also transfers. So this will be handy as you guys are training your district staff on the new redesigned inventory. There also is an inventory FAQ, which they have, when we first started out, this page was blank. So they've been populating it with more frequently asked questions on this page. So if you ever had a question on acquisitions, you can come to this page and look at what has been frequently asked prior to contacting us first, if that's what you so choose, or you can contact us. But there's a section for acquisitions, items, and items is very large, dispositions, pending items, transfers, and then they have a miscellaneous section. Next is the migration procedures. We have sent everyone emails with this pre-data extract procedure. And what we found in going through all these previous rounds, that it's extremely important for you guys to look over the pre-data extract procedures and run all these reports. It's far easier to make corrections in the beginning than if we go and import your data and we find an error and then we have to fix that and then re-import again. So it's extremely important that everyone look at this prior to your production date or prior to your export date, to go through and to run all these reports and look for all the suggestions that SACT has said. Balancing day, what will that look like? So everyone has dates, and hopefully everyone has all that information documented. And please let us know if you need to know what your production dates are. We'll get that information out to you. But balancing day, it's going to be somewhat similar to how it was for USAS and USPS, except for there's going to be a few differences. So on the morning of import, we'll go in and we'll set up your instances, make sure everything is working right, make sure things are linked between Redesign and USAS, create all your users that need access. So if you haven't let us know that before, shoot us an email to let us know who all needs access and what roles they may need. We'll send you an email letting you know what your production URL is. and your username and password. Well, your username is going to be the same thing as what you used in Classic and or Redesign. We'll let you know what your password is. We're going to do all this application setup. You don't have to worry about the application setup. What you have to worry about is the balancing. And we're asking that you log into Redesign and also log into Classic and run each of these reports. Look and balance. Once when they balance, we're asking that you scan the total pages, sign an initial, and then scan that in back to us. Now, we're not going to say that you have to do it within a day, but we are asking that you do it within a couple of days. I found that for the most part, it only takes 15 to 20 minutes really to balance, to run all your reports into balance. So if you give yourself a good solid hour, you could be done and balanced and checked off your list, and we're not hounding you about these reports. So here are the reports that we are asking our SSDT is saying that we need to run. So first is the EIS 102, which is the fixed assets by function or class. And then there's notes over as to how to run the report in both systems. The next report is the EIS 103, which in Redesign is the schedule change in fixed assets. Next is the EIS 104, which is the schedule change in depreciation. Next is the EIS 202, which is lease asset listing report. This is optional. You only need to run it if you are indeed tracking leased assets. Next is the EIS 203, which is the asset listing by grant or source report. Next is the EIS 302, the location worksheet. This one is also an optional report. Then next is the EIS 304, which is the brief asset listing report. And then the EIS 305 report, which is the book value report. On balancing day, you do not have to run the EIS 501 or the pending items list report because they're not going to balance because in EIS you didn't have one and then you'll have one here. And then also if we have to re-import you, we have to go through an additional step if you run this report. So if you guys have this printed out on your screen, or if you can print it out, just put an X next to this one. This is one that you will not need to do. And like I said, once when you've run all these reports and you're balanced, you can sign and initial the scan total reports and then send those back to us. If you run into any problems while you're balancing any of these reports, make a note and then contact us so that we can help tell you what you would need to do so that we can get it balanced. Sometimes we may have to consult with SSDT on how to fix it because there could be something wrong. Sometimes, but a lot of times there's some pretty easy fixes. Are there any questions about balancing day? Sharon, did I forget anything? Meta staff, did I forget anything?
I think you're good.
Think I'm good?
Yeah.
Any questions? Does everyone feel a little bit more at ease now that you've seen the actual software? Trey, do you have a question?
I have two questions. The one was on balancing day, we do not need to run the pending item list, correct?
Correct.
501,
Correct.
but we will run the rest of the reports.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Except for those two optional ones, the lease payments and the location worksheet, those are optional.
Right, okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
And then remind me, have you sent out our balancing date, or is it to come?
I believe they have, but if you just, which district are you with?
Tays Valley.
Tays Valley. Okay, let's look. So Tays, looks like your production date is this Friday.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Can you tell me when Washington Niles is? I don't, because I can't find that email.
Okay. Looks like yours is Wednesday, September the 28th.
Board meeting.
Uh, but just remember, it should only take about an hour, but if you need to move it over to the next day, that would be fine. We understand. We understand that EIS isn't something everyone's doing all the time, it's on a as needed basis sometimes. So we're not going to be as much of a stickler as we were for USAS and USPS, just because you guys needed to make sure you process payroll and generate any checks. So we need to get you in there quicker.
And also too, if anybody is ready to go ahead of time, you're just send us a help desk ticket or an email. And if you're ready to go, we can start that extract process and get you into production faster. If it's something that you need, we've been hearing a couple of rumblings from auditors saying that they need EIS reports for 22 and things like that. So if you're waiting, and you haven't added any of your 22 stuff and you need to get going, and if you want to go ahead, by all means, that's perfectly fine also.
Yes. Any other questions? You guys were a quiet group. Well, I hope you all enjoy. By all means, if you guys have any questions, even on balancing day, you guys have any questions, don't sit and think, give us a call, let us know, send us an email or whatever, and let us know, and we'll help you through this. But I know in the Dayton area, I think we've done 14. We have 14 live, and we have about a few more left. I think we was going to do, is it 90, Sharon? 90?
I think.
Yeah, and I think we're probably down to this last round. I'm not quite for certain how many we haven't done, but. Well, thank you all for attending this training. Like I said, it is recorded, so we are going to be posting this out onto our website that you can review at your leisure. And hope you guys all have a wonderful evening.